Hello, welcome to Conquer Your Fabric Fears with me, Ange Wilson from GnomeAngel.com. Today we're going to be talking about the thing that either brings you a lot of joy or fills your heart with fear and trepidation: picking fabrics. Now, this is my favorite part of patchworking, and it's something that I hope by the end of this presentation you will be empowered, emboldened to go to your stash and have fun picking fabrics. This is a very simple way of doing it. There's no art theory involved. You don't need a degree in art history, or you don't need to be quote unquote a professional artist. This is about using fabrics you love to make quilts that you love and will bring you joy for years to come. So let's get started. Who am I? I am a mother, a wife, a daughter, a sister, all of those things. But in my professional career, I have been everything from a government worker to working for a non-profit to doing all sorts of things. And in amongst all of that, I've run my own patchwork pattern design business. Now, I started patchworking in 2011. My first experience with patchwork was interesting, to say the least. I had a teacher who was doing her best, but just didn't know how to handle my exuberance and my impatience and my really, really bad stitching. On my third class of her Patchwork for Beginners class, she suggested I take up scrapbooking and leave the fabric and sewing behind me. Now, bless, I didn't take that on board. I pursued patchworking with more vengeance, and I found a teacher who was teaching a course who understood how to channel my focus and my joy of color and print into something more manageable, and taught me how to really sort of knuckle down and practice the quarter inch, which is really important. So, sometimes it's about finding the right teacher, and sometimes it's about the right teacher finding you. So, with that love of fabric and a newfound patience for stitching accurately, I became obsessed with patchwork. I set myself the challenge of making 12 quilts in a year. I came fairly close. I think I did 7. But in that time, it taught me a lot about how fabric and color play together. I became obsessed with just devouring anything patchwork and fabric related. Um, I found that I had a particular love and was drawn to the technique fussy cutting. That's where you pay specific mind to what motif or colors in the print that you're going to use in your patchwork. So much so that in 2017, I wrote a book for CNT Publishing called Fussy Cutters Club. It's still available now. And from there, I went on to develop an annual event where we ask you to sew 100 blocks in 100 days. The reason behind that is that I am a firm believer in making time and space for your craft, in practicing, and in collaborative sewing as a group. And so 100 days, 100 blocks was born from that. I've taught all over the world. I've taught on internationally. I've taught domestically. I was trained by the government in my day job to be a trainer. So all of these things have come together and culminated in my love of patchwork and an online community that to this day brings me joy, so much joy in just seeing what people make and sharing with them how I approach things and hopefully making it easier for them. So that's a little bit about me. Now let's do a little bit about fabric. So for me, I believe fabric selection is deeply personal. Now we talk about it really casually, and we we sometimes we're a bit flippant about our fabrics, but really at the end of the day, the fabrics that you love and are drawn to are specific to you and your type of creativity. Now, we may overlap with things that we love with other people. You and your bestie might have some of the same fabrics in your collection, but how you use those and the feelings and responses that they evoke in you is completely personal to you. So, this is about unlocking who you are and how we can use those fabrics to tell a story or to make quilts that bring you joy, reflect who you are a little bit of you. Like, it's one of the things I love about quilting and patchwork is that it's a craft that we hand down through the generations. And as a mother, I knew that when my son was born, the thing that he would have left of me long after I'm gone are the multitude of quilts that I've made him. And for me, they're like me being able to give him a little hug when I'm not there. He can wrap himself in the same fabrics that I've handled, that I spent hours with, that I chose, and he can have a little bit of me. He can look at those fabrics and see a little bit of who I was and who I am. So, I take fabric selection very seriously, but not so seriously that it's, what's the word that I'm looking for that's polite? I don't think fabric selection is something for refined, arty farty types. This is about you getting in touch with what brings you joy. So, I believe strongly that you can train yourself when it comes to fabrics, that you can learn how to use those fabrics, and that if you stay true to what you love, then you will continue to make quilts that you love for years to come. So I approach fabric selection in two ways, either with a project in mind, so a pattern that I've seen and I've fallen in love with, or with a specific fabric in mind. So starting with a project in mind is when you want to make, say you've fallen in love with the kinship quilt pattern that I designed with Beck from Skyberries, and you want to make that kinship sampler. You have that project in mind, you know what you're going to be making, and so you know what the set scale of those blocks is, and you can pick fabrics to complement that pattern. Starting with fabric in mind is when you have a fabric palette that you've fallen in love with. You've curated a couple of different fabrics and blenders and solids and all of those sorts of things, and you want to make a quilt that shows that off. To do that, you're going to have to understand the scale of the prints that you're using that are in that curated selection you've got, and you are going to have to find a pattern that will best display those fabrics for you. So to me, there's two ways. That's it. It's no more complicated or difficult than that. So let's have a look. If you start with a pattern in mind, or you are looking for a pattern to highlight those fabrics, the first thing I always do is read the pattern before I make my fabric selections. So I know everyone says read the pattern, and then all of us, myself included, go, yeah, I know how to do that. I know what that is. That's a churn dash. I know how to make one of those. And we just get super excited and we rush off and we pull fabrics and we start. And about a quarter of the way in, you realize that something's not right, or that you could have picked something better, or you wish you'd used some other fabric. I find starting with the pattern helps alleviate a lot of that, about 80% of that. So, this is a must do for me. And I find when we run 100 days, 100 blocks, this is usually the cause of 90% of the questions I get are people haven't read the pattern. So what I like to do is sit down with the pattern and a pen or a highlighter and a pencil and go through and have a look at what the size of the piecing is in the pattern, because this will determine the scale of fabric that you use. If your piecing is 2 inches by 2 inches and you've got an Anna Maria Horner floral, that the floral print itself is 6.5 inches by 6.5 inches, cutting it down to 2 inches, you're going to lose a lot of that pattern. Now, that might be what you want. You might want to be cutting for color, but if you're cutting to show off that artist's motif, then a 2 inch square isn't going to help you. If you've got a pattern that calls for a 6 by 6 piece and you're using a print, say a ditzy print like polka dots or stripes or something like that, where the pattern itself, the motif in that pattern, fits in a 1 by 1 square, something 6 by 6 is going to be a large piece of fabric for a very small print. And so you might want to consider whether that's using that fabric in that space to the best of your ability. That 6 by 6 square might be better off with your 8 by 8 Anna Maria Horner floral, and then that 2 by 2 might work better with your ditzy pin dot polka dot. So there are cases when you want to use a big square of fabric with a small print. And so it's about understanding the concept of what you're going for. What are you trying to evoke with your finished patchwork? Are you showing off the floral? Are you showing off a certain color within the floral? Are you, is there, say, for example, a unicorn in the print that you're going to want to highlight in your piecing? It's about being conscious of the decisions that you're making. So sit down with the pattern, go through it, have a think about it. I like to pull the fabrics that I think I'm going to use and then leave them on my cutting table for a day or two and just kind of live with it for a little bit, think about the pattern, think about what I'm trying to achieve, and then think about cutting. So the next step is considering what you're going to use in your quilt, your bag, your cushion, your mug rug, whatever you're working. So we've covered a little bit of this. It's that scale. What size are the pieces in the patchwork work block you'll be making? What size are the prints you'll be using? Really simple, basic, this is the foundational sort of stuff. I was going to say it's sort of like math, but if you're like me, the word math scares you. So I'm going to say it's about making sure that the square fits the square, if you know what I mean. So the next thing is pattern. Is there a secondary pattern in the patchwork blocks that you would like to highlight? So sometimes if you're doing a one block repeating pattern, so you're using the same patchwork block again and again in the pattern, secondary designs are created from piecing those and joining them together, especially if you're not using sashing. So, is there a secondary pattern that's going to reveal itself when you join those blocks together? A lot of really good pattern designers put in coloring sheets or use an amazing program like prequilt.com to plan out your color placement and what fabric you're going to do. I recommend photocopying or getting onto Prequilt and trying multiple different ways of putting in your fabrics and your colors to see what secondary patterns may emerge. The other thing I want you to think about too is which pieces in the patchwork block would you like to accentuate? Which ones do you want to be the focus and which ones do you want to be the background? Do you even want a background in those blocks? There's some beautiful quilts that are out there where there is no set background. Each block has a different color as the background, or it's scrappy. A lot of the low volume quilts that you see on the market or in the creative share space have different fabrics in there, what you would consider a background. The other thing I like to consider is, will a tonal difference help make more of a visual impact within the patchwork? A great tip that I was told very early on is to use your smartphone to take a photo of your fabrics all lined up together, and then using your editing software in your photo. It's standard, comes with every camera application on your smart devices is to edit it, select colors, and go and put on the iPhone, it's a mono filter over it, but it turns it to black and white. And you can see which fabrics are darker than others, and you can work out your tonal value difference. If you use two fabrics that are very close in tonal value beside each other in patchwork, regardless of their colors, they will disappear. They will blend together and they will seem less crisp in your patchworking. Now, me personally, that might be something that you're going for, but for me, I think if I'm going to spend hours trying to get my points right and to be mindful of all of those quarter-inch seams and things like that, then for me, making sure that the tonal value is clear is a big deal, because I want people to go, oh, look at all your points. So the third thing I look at is alteration. Do you want to tweak the pattern in any way? So do you want to scale it up or scale it down, remove a seam, add a seam? And I'll show you an example of what I mean by that. But sometimes we get a pattern and we absolutely adore the pattern, but we also really adore that big floral, and you want to show off that big floral. So sometimes scaling the pattern up or down is a great way of making it fit the fabrics that you want. And that's a really handy trick to have as a patchworker, is understanding the math behind making your blocks bigger or making them smaller. The other thing I like to think of too is, are there any unnecessary seams for the version of the patchwork that I want to make? So sometimes in patterns, you might have a pattern that has two squares beside itself, beside each other, that you would like to make as one big rectangle. Can you take that seam out and then make that a cohesive one-piece block? So it's about understanding and thinking about the process that you're going to go through to make that patchwork block. This is why reading the pattern at the start is so important, because you can be mindful and conscious and deliberate in those decisions you make as you work through that pattern. So once you've done all of that, here's some examples that I've put together that show these principles at play. So this is a simple churn dash block. It's part of the churn dash challenge that I offer on the website. And in it, I get you to make 3-inch churn dashes and 6-inch churn dashes. So, and as you can see in the first example, what I've done here is chosen a print that works really well in what I call the side pieces, those vertical rectangles. And you can see the beef eaters are fully displayed. You know what they are, you get the full sense of that print. The scale works beautifully for those side pieces. However, my little beef eaters that are in the horizontal pieces, they're getting cut off because their scale is too large, and so you don't have a real sense of what they are. And the cutting them off creates, I think, visual clutter, in that you've got their feet above their heads, which forms a line where, a line shouldn't really be in this block. So that's one of the things that I think about, especially with fussy cutting, is where are my cuts going to fall and how are they going to be displayed in my final patchwork? In the second example, instead of using one solid, one specific fabric for the frame, I use two different. Now, this actually in patchwork changes the name of this block. It's no longer a churn dash, but it is a churn dash, if you know what I mean. All the seams are exactly the same as a churn dash, just which fabrics you use where change the name of the block. So in this example, I've used fussy cut the stars to be in the half square triangles for the corners of the frame, and I've used a repeating line or stripe fabric. So the flamingos form a stripe. I've then specifically cut them so that the flamingos on the horizontal of those vertical frame pieces line up. So visually, the stripes are all continuous. And to me, that's really important because I don't want, like in the beef eaters, the mismatch of the pattern to distract from my patchwork piecing. So then in example 3, this is what I was talking about in terms of alteration. I had some really small scale prints. Those pieces in the middle of that churn dash finish at 1 inch by 1 inch, and I really wanted to show them off. But if I'd had just the French bulldog in the middle of that block, you would have gotten other French bulldogs from the repeat, and they would have like been half a dog, a third of a dog, a quarter of a dog, a bit of a dog. And it would have distracted from what was going on in the middle of that block for me. So I added 4 other seams, actually 1, 2, 3 seams. So I cut 4 1-inch, 1.5 blocks, joined them together to make the piece that was required for the front of that block or the middle of that block. So these are things that you can think about and ways to alternate or amend the pattern to reflect the fabrics that you really want to use. Again, with this one, the frame is all one fabric, unlike the first two. So the frame sort of recedes it away from this. It makes those middle pieces more obvious, and then the background is all one background as well, and so those two things don't compete for my 4 little icons in the middle of that churn dash. So this is how I choose fabric, and these are the types of fabric selection that you can pull from when you are doing your patchwork. And knowing and understanding these ways of choosing fabric kind of gives you a head start, because you can go, all right, I'm going to do, this style of quilt. And so that's a specific fabric pool. So the first one I use is a controlled palette. So this is where you choose fabrics that fall within one color group or 2 color groups. To me, this is a really great way of showing off a collection of fabrics and making them coherent, because you might be pulling across different lines, going for a scrappy look, but because they're all blues, they all play together. There's heaps of tools online for helping you pick a palette selection if you want to do a controlled palette. Pinterest is a great tool for going on and having a look and seeing what colors work with what and how to make those really sing and play with them together. Doing a controlled palette is a great way to mix in some solids as well to really punch home what color you're using. The second way I do it is to go with a specific designer. The reason that this is such a winner is that a good fabric designer uses the same or similar palette of fabric colors across all of their collections. Now, in this example, I've got a Chula Pink fabric pool there, but it works for Anna Maria Horner, any Carolina Friedlander, like Alison Glass, Giuseppe, whatever. A good designer will have a specific color framework that they use, and you can mix and match their fabrics across their collections. So this one to me is a really easy no-brainer. You want to go and just show off your favorite fabric designer. This is an easy win. Now, the third one is Scrappy. I find it really interesting what people call scrappy, because to me, I very rarely will sew from an entire collection. I like to pick and choose. There's some fabrics in a collection that I just absolutely love, and there's others that I'm like, eh. So for me, a lot of my quilts are this scrappy. I've picked across various collections. I've mixed and matched. I've done, you know, I've used them in other things, and so I've got odd little bits and ends of it. And this is a really fun one to do if you like that kind of busy look, or if you have, you like one print in one collection and then you want to mix and match it with another designer and use their work as well. Scrappy is the one that I find makes me happiest because I'm a control freak and I really love to, sorry, I should say I'm a control enthusiast who really enjoys being in charge of what goes where. So my go-to fabric selection method is the storyteller. So this is where you pick a theme and all of your fabrics play within that theme. So for example, I my go-to one is nautical. I choose anything to do with ships, anchors, ropes, ship prints, sailors, ocean prints, anything that I think can go into that nautical framework. And I tend to work in a palette that's blue white with a pop of red for nautical, because I think that evokes a nautical, that Nantucket, sailors, tall ships, that kind of thing. So um, I like to fussy cut to tell a story in my blocks as well. And so for me as a fussy cutter, the storyteller palette is most where I'm at home. And it is about picking fabrics that the motifs and the colors lend itself to telling that story. So, in the example that you can see here, this is my farmer's wife quilt. Farmer's wife sampler quilt, and it was one of the first quilts I made because I didn't understand piecing or anything like that. And I thought I could do it. And I can tell you now, some of those blocks have 72 pieces and they're all 1 inch finished flying geese or half square triangles. And it was a great learning experience. But in this, you can see I've put the lobsters, which is one of my favorite prints, with Chula Pink saltwater seabed print. So it's a cohesive story in that block. The one beside it that you can see is Heather Ross's mermaids, and they're paired with a Heather Ross seahorse, and the colors in that are a cohesive match those fabrics that I wanted to use. So the storyteller to me is one of those ones where I really get the most joy, and I have curated an extensive fabric collection that allows me to pick and choose. Now, the key to all of these fabric selection tools is that you have to buy fabric you love. We've all done it. We've all bought fabric where we think the cool kids are using it. I don't really like it, but they all seem to be making really beautiful quilts with it. I'll add some to my collection. And then it sits there for 10 years and you find some friend that's like, I love that fabric. And you're like, here, have mine. It's not worth it, right? You work hard for your money. You work hard to carve out time to devote to your patchworking. You need to use fabrics you love. So to me, it's about, when I go into a fabric store, I know that I am drawn heavily to pinks and blues. And so they're the colors that I will add to my stash because they're the quilts I'm going to make. I make a lot of rainbow quilts. So I always keep an eye out for a yellow fabric because yellows are really, a nice yellow is hard to find. I look at my stash regularly and look for holes in the palettes. Do I have blender prints? So not specific motif prints, but blenders are like your tone on tone, your polka dots, your stripes. Your solids are used as a blender, but they're not called blenders, they're called solids. So what have I got that I can do a cohesive and a balanced fabric pool when I'm ready to make something? And if you look at your fabric stash as a well-stocked pantry, in that pantry you need some condiments and spices. So your blenders, your solids, I look at those as your condiments. So they're the things that are going to enhance the natural flavors of your focus or hero prints. And so for me, the hero prints are those florals I can't walk past, the motifs that make me chuckle, like anything that's funny that I find funny or reminds me of a joke that I've had with someone I love. I pick up those. They're the prints that you really want to draw attention to. And so, for example, in the mermaid block that's on here, the dots and the solid are my blenders, my condiments, and then the hero print is the mermaid and the seahorses. In the lobster version we've got there, the hero print is actually the lobsters and the blender is that busy seafloor. It's sitting back and there's very little white in it, so the white of the lobsters makes them really accentuated and they stand out. So it's about playing, mixing and matching. The other thing that I would recommend is don't listen to anybody else and what they love. Pick what you love and take it from there. So if you've found this interesting or you want to know more about how I approach fabric selection, I do have a book called Fussy Cutters Club. It's available on Amazon. I have it on my website. It is one of my favorite things I've ever made, and it's a great way to get started on your fussy cutting journey. If you would like to have more fun with me and spend some time honing your craft and talking with other fabric enthusiasts, don't forget to check out 100 Days, 100 Blocks. It starts 1st of July and we'll be making the quilt that you can see on the left, which I call 99 Problems. It's a 100 block sampler quilt of varying sizes. This is it mocked up in Cave Facet in a rainbow. And I have a lot of other versions to give you inspiration and see how fabrics, what you can play with. So I hope that's taught you something. I hope you're excited to get playing with your fabrics. You are an artist and your fabrics are your paint or medium of choice. And the key is to just do what brings you joy. If you do that, you'll always make quilts that are winners and you'll always make quilts that you love. Have a great day. Happy fabric fondling.